mean, I love this idea so much, I even got it tattooed on me.
Final balance before finals are provided. Yeah, do like 20.
Photography for that. The plate collapsed off. So, I need to call them down. So if you haven't gotten a chance to listen to the This Week in Weddings podcast, the episode 82, it was the one I was on, about getting clients to trust you. You know, I've said it here before. Essentially, I've learned that because so much of what I value about the work that I do and that my clients value about it is the creative part of it. Not necessarily the design, but the concept and the ideas behind the execution, that I now charge for that, for the proposal, because that's where so many of the really great points of value that I can bring to a project come from. And it's not something a lot of stationers do, and that's fine, but it's something I need to do for my business to do what it needs to do. And we had a great conversation with the ladies at This Week in Weddings, but I was talking to my sister, and she listened to the episode and had mentioned that a story that I told on there is one she had never heard before, and that really, it kind of shocked me. I forget that because I live my story that I don't always, and I frankly, I tell stories a lot too, I don't always get, sometimes I forget that people don't know these stories. And so I want to tell you a little bit about why I actually do this, why stationery. And essentially, it comes from when I was in grad school. So I have a bachelor's degree in music education. And I taught for a year. It was the worst year of my life. It wasn't the students, it was the adults, parents, administrators. It was not my calling at all. And so I went back to school. I went to grad school. I went to the University of South Florida, go Bulls, and majored, I got a master's of music and jazz studies as a bass player. And it should be known that the only reason I got into grad school, because A, I wasn't the best student, and B, my undergrad education was kind of weak. I wasn't prepared for grad school, but because I was a little bit better at business stuff than the other musicians I was hanging out with, I was able to hustle a graduate assistantship. So I worked for this guy named Chuck Owen, and Chuck is probably one of the most impressive people I know. Chuck is an incredible jazz composer and arranger, and because he loves that work so much, he had created this research institute called the Center for Jazz Composition. And in the first year, I was just a grad assistant there, and then the manager left, and so I kind of moved into this role where I was helping manage it. And as an aside, one of the things that I learned was I thought that I was good at business stuff, but really I was only better than the people around me. It's like the thing about how if a bear's chasing you, you don't have to be faster than the bear, just faster than the other guy. It was one of those deals. So I struggled a little bit there, but I learned so much. I did my first graphic design project. I designed an ad that was, I think it was even like the back page ad of some major national jazz publications. Now, I inherited a really pretty solid design from my predecessor, and it was in Like it was in Pages, so I had to work in Pages. It was before I knew anything about the Adobe Suite or anything. It was awful. My part of it was, but it worked and it got me a little bit excited. But what really got me excited was I took Chuck's first year grad level comp and arranging class, composition and arranging. And he made us do our first couple assignments longhand. We had to write out the music. And I was pretty intimately familiar with music notation, but writing music out by hand in a way that was legible for other musicians was a whole different ball of wax. And somehow in the middle of that class, it came up the idea that so much of the jazz, like the big band manuscripts that I had read, all this, it all has a certain look. In fact, in music notation software, there's like a jazz version. And a lot of that comes from this thing called the music nib. And it's a very specific nib for a fountain pen. Now, I carry a fountain pen with me pretty much wherever I go, and it's because of Chuck's class. I fell in love with this idea that this physical thing, now this isn't a music nib, this is a Lamy Safari, like extra fine nib, but that this thing here, this physical thing could manifest itself as printed work, as communication. And I just found it so fascinating that writing that music with this extra fine nib would make it look completely different than with that music nib. Same strokes of the hand, all that stuff, same pressure, everything. Just the shape of that nib changed everything and made it expressive and legible and all those things. And so this happened to be around the time where like hipster culture was at its full tilt. You know, this was when people were like spinning yarn on the subway and bringing manual typewriters into the coffee shops. And I started to notice that in the world that I was observing, people my age, now I'm 36 now, I'm an old millennial, but people my age had been sold kind of this whole view of the world that was shifting right underneath our feet. And one of the things that I realized was that we had this ancestral memory, this memory of the things that our parents and our grandparents knew, and maybe even more importantly, our great-grandparents, that we had lost to history in the name of modern convenience. So, you know, my great-grandparents, well, even my grandparents, when they were kids, they'd go out back and wring a chicken's neck for dinner, and now you go buy boneless, skinless from the grocery store if you're cooking at home even. They used to have to hone their own razors or change, you know, a little double-edged blade and do all these things that were rituals of their daily lives. And in those rituals, they were forced to take a little bit more time to reflect on their day, to engage in deeper relationship, to experience life in a way that sometimes we forget how to. So in the name of modern convenience, we lost a lot of rituals. You know, Bake-A-Lite came along and TV dinners and all those things that were supposed to free us up to live more meaningful lives. But really, in practicality, most of us just filled it with more crap. And so I think that there's this longing for a lot of us to experience this life that our grandparents knew, that our great-grandparents knew, that we have never fully experienced. And that's why millennials are interested in experiences over objects and all those kinds of things. And I'm sure anthropologists and sociologists can tell you a lot more about it than that. And maybe I'm wrong, but it's the way I see the world. All of this stuff was kind of coming to a head in grad school, and I'm making music, and I'm in love with the creation of music, but frankly, I'm not all that great at it. And what I realized was, as I had this little bit of experience in design, and I started to think about rituals, that what really kind of worked for me was this nexus of the greatest ritual of most people's lives, their wedding, and design. And so it came together, and it was pretty basic in the beginning. You know, it was just designing wedding invitations. But as I started to let this idea of ritual percolate and of connection and relationship percolate that comes from experiencing those rituals together, about reflecting on life together, what I've come to believe is that the stationery I create, when my clients and I both put in the emotional labor to make something truly spectacular, when we do that together, the stationery that I create deepens relationships and creates, NPR has their driveway moments. I want to create mailbox moments or cocktail table moments where we create new rituals in people's lives, where they get to experience something and slow down for a second and experience this thing I've created that enhances their relationship with the person who gives it to them. It all seems pretty lofty, but I wouldn't do this if it weren't for that. Printing presses are cool and graphic design is cool, but none of it is as cool as the experience I get when I get to help a client truly engage with their people. It's why I do it. Speaking of which, we're working on it right now, and I've got Marcus right here working on this. There you are. Say hey.
Hey.
Sometimes you just got to put a ton of handwork into something because you can't figure out how to do it right on press. This is one of those things. So Marcus is helping me with this. I'm going to get joining him in a few minutes. But until next time, you know what to do. I'll see you later. Bye.